Hello and welcome to Writers and Books Visiting Author Series. My name is Dan Hurd. I'm the Director of Adult Programs. Writers and Books is a nonprofit literary arts center in Rochester, New York. We offer readings, workshops, and literary programming for people of all ages and backgrounds, all currently available online. Our theme for 2021 is Taking Care. We're celebrating different ways we can take care of ourselves and take care of others this year. You can check out our upcoming schedule at wab.org. We're so happy to have Sarah Freligh with us this evening. First, we'll hear from Sarah, then she'll be in conversation with poet Carrie L. Bennett. Please say hello in the chat and let us know you're there. Feel free to submit questions to the Q&A function. Sarah's book, We, is available through our bookstore, Ampersand Books. I'll put the link in the chat. Sarah Freligh is the author of Sad Math, winner of the 2014 Moon City Press Poetry Prize and the 2015 Whirling Prize, A Brief Natural History of the American Girl, and Sort of Gone. Recent work has been featured on the Writer's Almanac, appeared in the Cincinnati Review, SmokeLong Quarterly, Diode, and in the anthologies New Micro and Best Microfiction 2019 and 2020. Among her awards are a poetry fellowship from the National Endowment for the Arts, and a grant from the Constance Saltonstall Foundation. She lives and swims in Rochester, New York. Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much. And thank you very much to everybody for being here. I was thinking about this a little while ago as I was waiting to connect. And I think my first reading at Writers and Books was in 1992. Old
Hello. I'm here.
The heck is that? At the old theater upstairs. And eventually I read in the Cell Gallery, the cafe out in front, and in the auditorium, the latest one upstairs. So I've read everywhere, but this is the first time I've read for Writers and Books in my living room, and it's kind of nice to be here. But anyways, thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Writers and Books, Dan, for all you do for the community. As it says on the screen, you can get your copy of We at Ampersand Books and many, many other great selections. So please, hopefully you'll check it out. Thank you too to Small Harbor Publishing, who took a chance on me and published this book. It's they have published a journal for years, and they decided to go into book publishing, and this is their first offering, and I couldn't be more honored and have a better experience with them. So anyways, on to the reading. First poem is a letter to a friend in May. I thought we'd start with a seasonal poem because April is National Poetry Month, and it's also the cruelest month. So letter to a friend in May. Late April, when the snow finally melted, not in a flood, but a gradual retreat, a letting go, revealing the hurt earth underneath. The mud and the hosses, fragile shoots for now. Finally warm enough today to transplant the seedlings, nasturtiums and zinnias, give them a taste of what life will be like outside. Hands in the dirt, a thought of your brother and mine, and how in the midst of all these beginnings, someone, somewhere is always ending. The cycle of life, mesh of gears and speed, grinding on. I know time heals what wounds us, but try to tell me in January that winter will end, that under a foot of snow, a seed can grow. I was challenged several years ago to write a story in one sentence, and I sort of did it. So here it is, a kind of magic. He tells me that his mother carries a lock of his dead father's hair coiled inside the folded bills of her wallet. How she'll forget about it altogether and have to pluck it, embarrassed, from a spill of dimes and nickels on the checkout counter at the grocery store. Sometimes she'll tell the startled cashier that it's her hair, from when she was a natural blonde, when her hair hung thick and straight to the ass of her tie-dyed miniskirt, when she went by the name of Star Astor and danced naked in the rain at Woodstock, way before she was somebody's mother, or the widow of a man who left her with nothing but a shoebox full of unpaid bills and 3 photographs from their honeymoon in Vegas, their faces smudged gray with fatigue after a night at the craps table, where they wagered everything but their round-trip Greyhound tickets from Ann Arbor. Back when his blonde hair hid his eyes, curtained his face as he kissed the dice. Back when she would bet anything was possible, when she still believed love was a kind of magic. Ann Arbor, 1974. Sky bruising purple when I stuck out my thumb and caught a fast ride west in a spoke-wheeled Cadillac with 3 geezers who passed a silver flask of scotch, honeyed with age, and even I sang along with Sinatra on the car radio. Soprano blanketing their reedy tenors, all the way to South Bend, where the driver had me a Hershey bar and a wad of ones. I played pinball for hours at the Greyhound station, high on horsepower and whiskey, an eternity before the bus chuffed in. How is it that time is slow and heavy as an elephant when you're young and impatient to get on to the next second? Now the merry-go-round of years, a heartbeat between Christmases. It's like you go out a girl who can honky-tonk all night and come home old, smelling of spiced apples and cat, fat with memories coating your bones. Everybody at some point in their life, if you're female, most of us have been a waitress at some point. And it is, it's a very interesting job because I taught in colleges for a long time. That was my last job. And I have to say that waitressing is much more collegial than teaching in college. Here are these people that you really can't stand and you don't, but you all hang out together, you all help each other. You go into this place that's set up beautifully, it turns into a mess, and at the end of the night, you put it all back together again and you leave your work there. And the best part about it is that you go in broke and you walk out with, like a pile of cash so it's a great cash legally. Unlike, other jobs. So anyways, it's a great thing to, I don't want to go back to it, but I love to go back to it in poem. So here's one, Light Years. Tonight, the moon's an orange wedge, frazzle-edged leftover, stuck to a gray bowl of twilight sky, orange like the bartender used to slice in the slow hour before 5 o'clock rush, tossed into the garnish trough for us waitresses to thread onto swizzle sticks I'd balance across the lip of a drink, a Collins or a whiskey sour, lady drinks, I thought of them, drunk by women with diamonds the size of gumballs weighing heavy on ring fingers. The husband ordered, always, she'll have, he'd say, and leer at me, his co-conspirator, while she stared out at the putting green where college guys, adorable in shorts, competed for beer. An orange slice or 2 was all I ate some nights. I stuffed down my hunger with water and a quick cigarette out back on the freight dock where dishwashers passed a joint and named the constellations for me. The Big Dipper, Orion and his flashy Elvis belt of stars, Cassiopeia, wife of Cepheus, sentenced to life in the sky for boasting she was more beautiful than the sea nymphs, comely and younger. At night's end, I unfurled white linens fresh from plastic bags, set my tables with silver still hot to the touch. Only then could I punch out, spill into the night, headlong toward the next minute when something or anything could happen. The earth was turning, tilting fat on its axis, and I ached for a kingdom to be queen of. This is sort of, like around the same vintage. Makeup. I put some on tonight for the first time in, I don't know, months. It's a lost art, makeup. The hoodie girl in your homeroom, the fat one who carries condoms in her purse, says to ditch the pink lipstick, eyeliner, a gob of mascara, what it will take to saddle up and ride with her and her friends, who herd by the window in the third floor girls' room, lit cigarettes in hand. You yearn to smoke elegant like your mother, deliberate, the punctuation she inserts before inhaling and saying no. Because you ache to break from the corral of country club boys and their callous golf hands, you skip fifth hour and let that hoodie girl sit you down on a toilet seat and paint you up into somebody else. Somebody who'd look good riding shotgun, bourbon breathed, arm cocked on an open window. Someone at home with a cigarette in her hand, exhaling, yes, yes, yes. Here's a new one. Since we're talking about makeup, lipstick. This is going to be an 100-word story soon. I'm not sure when, but it's going to be in lipstick. We learn to paint our mouths kissable, but we're taught not to by the parish priest, by our mothers, by 17 magazine. Never on the first date, never more than one boy at a time, never below the neck. We practiced on the mirror and at slumber parties. When boys scratched on the window, we giggled and shivered. Only Lana slipped out, came back smeared and tight-lipped, full up with stories she wouldn't tell us. At school on Monday, we lipsticked the mirror in the third floor girls' room. Lana sucks. Later, we all learned. Later, we all did it. Another one that is not in the book. November, month of mold and radiators, month when girls are marched single file into the sneaker stink of the boys' gym, where we're sized up and partnered off. Even the holy roller girls who dance with each other so their pastor daddies don't show up and spout scripture with the principal. The president himself is called us soft, urges us to exercise. He hikes 50 miles on weekends, waving to photographers, lugging the bad back he shattered in the same war that wounded our fathers. Our fathers are shut doors. Their sons lock us into dance pose, lead us through the four-step and the cha-cha, the dip and swirl. Already they have back seats and refuse to keep secrets. No one is safe. For years, we'll break ourselves against their bouldered silence. The president will travel to Dallas. In a corner of the gym, the holy roller girls clutch each other and sway in small circles, eyes shut to the world long after the music stops. This is a story I wrote, I think, in May, and I sent it off, and the title was Epidemic. And I didn't really think about because I guess the titles come up in the in submittable, and one of the readers said, oh, here's another pandemic story, and I thought, oh no, but they read it, they took it. But anyways, Epidemic. Because Davy Gray is protected by the blood of Jesus and his scripture spouting pastor daddy, he stays in the classroom practicing his times tables while the rest of the class waits outside the gymnasium, sleeves rolled for the stern-faced nurses to swab and stab us with the biggest needles in the history of the world, according to Marky Wolf, who will faint at the very sight of it, or Judd French, who Darlene Meadows will tell us cried like a little baby, though he looked just fine by the time we break into groups of 3 and argue over what color to make the map of the Dakotas, green or blue, I say, though Judd insists on brown because of the Badlands, while Davy just sits there coloring and quiet. Because we are inoculated, none of us will get the mumps that year or the next. So Davy Gray will spend a month in the hospital in 8th grade and come back to us a shadow, skinny as a scarecrow and sterile, according to Darlene, who claims she overheard her nurse mother say the sickness settled in his balls and turned him sterile as a donkey, which is how the joke got started. How is a starter's pistol like Davy Gray? Answer, both of them shoot blanks. Something we will ha over until the day Davy shows up in school with his father's gun and his black backpack and shoots his way through the cafeteria before the cops show up and lead him away, but not before he kills 6 people, Judd and some other jocks and a lunch lady. And for weeks, the school will be lit up with television cameras and microphones tethered to women with gloss on faces who talk about never forgetting what happened here. But there will be a mall the next week, and after that, a synagogue and a movie theater and a mall again until we lose track, an epidemic of violence, say the gloss on faces, before tossing to the weather guy for tomorrow's forecast. More rain on the way. And sometimes I think about hunting down Davy Gray, but I never do. Though what I did do once was drive through North Dakota, where I took a cell phone shot at sunset of the Badlands, which weren't bad at all. In fact, they're kind of lovely in their shadow dark. Let's see, another poem. This one is not in the book. Sorry. It's ode to my brother. For teaching me how to belch for 15 seconds straight, how to armpit fart in church, how to sing Sinatra while belching, how to turn my eyelids inside out, how to roll a joint left-handed while right-handing a stick shift, how to pause prior to the punchline of a joke, give it the tiniest white light of time, the way a line break will slow a poem. So please note how I pause here so I can say, he died before I could thank him for the socks he sent me 3 Christmases ago. He died on his bicycle before I could tell him I love the book he recommended, that I got hooked on the author too. I ask him, which one is your favorite? Funny, the radiator answers, the toilet farts to life. I swear to God, they're singing. Away. This is another one. This is the first one I wrote, I think during the pandemic in March, when it was becoming apparent we weren't going to go away anytime soon. We were stuck. So I wrote a poem where I could be on the road, which was the next best thing. Away. We spent our last $3 on a tall boy that we passed back and forth through most of Iowa. 24 hours we'd been driving away from the city and the sirens and the stink of the streets. Truckers honked around us, past us. We waved to the cute ones, hiked our skirts higher on our pale thighs. We were down to warm suds when the needle scraped E, and we pulled into a mom and pop station at the next exit. We sat on the curb out front and discussed what we were willing to do for a gallon or two, steal, sell ourselves, and laughed until our pants were damp. The owner called us sweethearts and gave us coffee and a couple of stale donuts before he shut off the lights and headed home. I'd never seen so many stars. Sitting there like that, I was sure I could feel the earth turn, but you said no. It was only the grumble of trucks on the interstate. Still, it was nice to think we were moving forward, away from ourselves, even while we were stuck. So one last one, what we remember. Thank you for being here. The holy roller girl who writhed with the fever of Jesus on Sunday while her pastor daddy twirled snakes like lariats over the heads of sinners crying to be cleansed, who bust in from out county on Monday, undressed for gym in a mop closet, who stuffed a transistor radio down her pants while her pastor daddy handed out salvation in front of Sears, believed she'd ascended to heaven whenever Diana Ross sang in her ears, all gauze and sequins, whenever Smokey Baby babied her down rows of corn where she danced with her tall green partners. The nights her father came to sanctify her, the day she collapsed in gym class and sang to Jesus in her gospel tongue, an arpeggio of gibberish, all amen and hell yes. How she came back to us, a ghost girl, rinsed of all but the hard, high notes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
That applause is coming from everyone.
It is. Well, I'm saying hi. I'm saying hi to Fort Lauderdale. Hi, Pat. Hi, Kitty. Hi, Yunya. Hi, Valerie. Hi, Sarah.
Yeah.
Hi, Mina. Hi, Lee. Woo! Hi, Veronica. You know, like, yeah, okay, great.
Yeah, the chat was really active. People were digging those last lines and your Michigan poems and hearing new things, so hearing new work. So everyone's excited. If anyone has any questions that you want me to ask Sarah, I'm happy to do so. You can put them in the chat or in the Q&A. Both of those are at the bottom of your screen. And I will get us started while we watch to see if anything comes through. So Sarah knows I love this book and these poems, and they are definitely timeless and will be on my shelf as a favorite for a very long time. One thing that somebody brought up was the nostalgia that in the Michigan poems, and I had a question about that, so I thought I would ask it. We all have been told about the bad guy sentimentality in poetry, and so we try to avoid it when we write it, or in microfiction or other forms of writing. So these do avoid that, but I agree there is some nostalgia there. And I think it comes a little bit from the redemption, that's the gritty details with redemption mixed into the work. So can you talk about that? Is that something purposeful that you do, or is it something that just happens?
I'm glad, like nostalgia rather than, like sentimentality. Like I remember, I think it was Mark Irwin that used to say sentiment is good, sentiment is good, sentimentality is not, because it just, you end up drowning the poem in your tears. Nostalgia, like I go back to, I think it was the epigraph for A Movable Feast by Hemingway, who is, like, I don't know if you caught the PBS, the 3 nights, I think it started on Monday. It's very good. I think they're trying to redeem his, like somewhat spotty reputation, literary reputation. But, like as somebody who's interested in micros, you have to read Inner Time, Hemingway's, because he was doing, like very, very short stories and doing beautifully these short stories when, like long ago. But his epigraph for A Movable Feast was, I think it was in Paris I could write about Michigan. Meaning that, like you have to go away from a place to be able to see it. And you see it in, like it's, you see the shadows and you see the light too. And that's a good thing too, I think, about being many places and being older too, is that you have perspective. It's like the poem Ann Arbor, I mean, God, like years used to seem like they were just, dragging, and now they're all so fast, except for last year, which doesn't count. So, like I think that's why nostalgia has kind of figured in. I'm able to see, I'm hoping though that I'm not coloring it, like rosy, that it's, like you say, that's the gritty details that are in there. So yeah. So, and anyways, yeah, great question. Cheers.
Yeah, and I cheers. The gritty detail is what I think so many people do love about these poems. It gives them such a physicality, including in these poems, the female body, which is just fantastically handled, how you have put, there's an embodiment in these poems and microfictions. And I keep saying poems, but I know that they sit on a line, and there's a question about that. But one thing that I really love about that is that the characters here fully embody their physical bodies, for better or worse, and the joys and pitfalls and negotiations of that. It's interesting how they only know what they know when they know it. I think you've done a very good job of, when you're talking about a teenage mind, there's the naivete there, right? And then
Yeah.
older voices know a little bit more. So how do you do that in the work? Having
That's,
them
like
know just enough.
I am crazy about point of view. I remember when I first started studying fiction in 1988, I think it was, I just left my job at the newspaper. And I went and begged my way into Temple's master's program. It wasn't an MFA program. It is now, but it was an MA program then. I didn't have any clips. I went up to, I begged my way in. I said, look, I work hard. I've done this. I go, well, all right. So they let me in and, so anyways, I'm sitting in these workshops, not knowing anything. But I remember my first instructor talking about, like everything arises from point of view. And it's like when you're a newspaper reporter, there is no point of view. There's the objective point of view. Unless you're writing a column, then it's I. But point of view is so vast, and everything, in fiction and in poetry to some extent too. I've done workshops where, like I've said, okay, poets, you've got to learn this. You've got to know this in order to, like be able to just get beyond the I and, the I of it all. But I think, there's a way to, there's various ways to approach the past, like from the story present, looking back on the past, where you're going to have actually two stories, the one that you're telling as an adult about the one that happened, like to a teenager, and one that's just that where time has collapsed completely onto that, event, that third floor girls' room, like where the Hoods are putting on makeup. So yeah, that is that's totally a function of point of view. And I'm learning something new about it every day. And that's what was so interesting for me to do these, like so many of these poems are first person plural, and what that meant and how freeing it was. That kind of got started with the last poem that I think I finished. Sad Math got accepted in October of 2014. And that was basically sort of the updated version of my thesis, my Ashland thesis. And I was busy moving poems in and out, ones that were weak, ones that didn't seem to fit, and writing new ones. And We Smoke was the last one that went in there. And I was trying to lineate that sucker. It would refuse to lineate in any interesting way. So finally, I just said, okay, I let it out of its lines and let it go where it wanted to. And it was so freeing. And writing in first person plural was just, it was ecstatic. It was so cool because it was this gang of girls, it was their safety in numbers. And also too, it was, it couldn't be really tied to, the way that often, like when a poet writes in from first person, it's like, oh, this is about you, isn't it? This happened to you. I'm so sorry it happened to you. And it's like, oh, it's all a lie, I mean, I'm a fiction writer. I make up a lot of stuff. I don't make up the emotions, but I make up a lot of stuff. And it's like, you could be free to be anybody, any group. So that's kind of a roundabout way to answer that question.
Yeah.
But I hope
there was actually a question about that in the chat. Are all these poems autobiographical and related, which is a fine line between microfiction and poetry, and how would you see the distinction?
I think especially there's always this, well, is it a micro, is it a prose poem? And it's like, well, okay, micro, like microfiction has causality. There's an if then, because this happened, this is going to happen. There's a narrative urgency to it. There is going to be a narrative arc. Something is going to be different at the end. Something's going to change at the end that wasn't so at the beginning. That's the nature of story. It's a container for change. A micro is just a small container. Whereas a poem, that doesn't have to happen. I think that it should happen. I think there's too few poems that just have no tension. They're pretty words. But if you could do everything, like get tension in the line and tension in the, like moving from line to line, and that something changes from beginning to end, and the language is pretty, that's a perfect poem. But that's, to me, is what the difference is that, like it's the narrative arc. There has to be a conflict. There is not necessarily going to be a resolution. There very rarely is in micro, but so that's how it's different from a poem. And the odd thing is too, is that I think I feel much more free to be lyric in microfiction than I do in my poems. My poems are pretty flat, I mean, they're pretty, just but I make, like nice sounds and stuff and bump words together, but they're not, they're not lyric, they're narrative. And I feel much more, because I think I have the safety of narrative, that I feel that I can experiment much more with the language and be, lyric that way. So, yeah. So I don't know if that answers.
So there were a couple of comments on specific words like chuffed, the bus chuffs in, and that's one of my favorite parts of that particular poem. You also use in this collection lipstick as a verb, I believe.
Yeah.
At what stage in the writing do you go in and really like push the language like that, or are you lucky enough that it sometimes comes to you in those initial drafts?
If it comes to you, like sometimes it does, like sometimes, especially too, when you're just writing out of your mind, when you're just sitting there going, for a while when I couldn't write, I was just, like clicking my eyes and just typing. And there was something, it's like, I don't know, remember when little kids close their eyes, when people come up to them and they think that they disappear, it's like, okay, I'm gonna close my eyes and the world's gonna disappear. And it's like, and I would type all this, like wild, stuff. And sometimes, like you just hit on something and it's like, wow, yeah. But also too, like I'm fascinated by, anthemaria, like nouning up a verb or verbing up a noun, and how it's actually an embedded, it embeds a metaphor. And that you can actually, a lot of micro is actually, like built entirely on extended metaphor that is not apparent, but it operates like this river, like going underneath it, so that, like all your images are going to pull that way, all your sounds are going to pull that way. But usually not until the end, not till the end. And I love to, like once I have the story kind of down and the structure kind of down, I love to fool around with words. I love to see how few words I can get away with without, like stripping it down to nothing and still have that richness. But I love fooling around with words. That to me is, I think, why I love micro. It's got the precision of poetry and the dependence on sounds, and to an extent metaphor, but also the urgency of narrative. And I love that combination of them. And it's small enough so that you feel like you can sit down and do one in the 15 minutes you have. I mean, I'd never written a story in 15 minutes, but you can write a draft in 15 minutes. And then you can go back and work on it. It feels great too to, like push yourself every day and go, wow, look at what I did. So yeah.
Yeah, that's often when I whine to you about, oh, Sarah, I'm not writing. That's what you say to me. Just sit down for 13 minutes and put a timer on and get over yourself and do it. So
yeah,
I appreciate that. And there is a question
to me, not writing is worse than writing. I mean, not writing is just the worst feeling in the world. It just feels, don't you feel unclean? I mean,
oh gosh,
like, oh God, I mean, it's like grouchy, and that's when I fall into habits, and like I'm usually eating, if I'm sitting there with a bag of chips in my hand, because I don't really like potato chips, but tell me I can't have a potato chip and I'll crawl on my arms and crawl on my hands and knees to Wegmans at 2 miles away and like get a bunch of chips. But yeah.
So there was a question in the chat about advice for new poets, and so when I asked you about putting my butt in the chair, it reminded me of that question. So what advice would you give to new poets and learning to write well?
I told this story many times. I was a teacher at the Ann Arbor Book Festival in 2009. That was not long after sort of gone. My first full-length collection came out. And Elizabeth Kostova was the keynote speaker at lunchtime. And she was a graduate of the Michigan MFA program, during which she wrote most of her novel, The Historian, which was this monster novel on vampires. It was a literary vampire novel, really, really good. It was a critical success, and it was a bestseller, which is, you know, every agent's dream and every writer's dream. But during the Q&A, somebody asked her, what advice would you give a new writer? Or what advice do you have for writers? She said, don't get into too many habits. And, you know, like you can look around the room, people are going to, you know, because the first thing they tell you is like, sit at the same seat every day, sit down at the same time, use the same pen, you know, do the same stuff, you know, like it's and she said, look, she says, here's how it is. She said, you ever go on a diet, you know, and you're doing fine on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, then on Thursday you eat something. By Friday, you know, your diet shot to hell, and by Monday you've forgotten about it. She says it's kind of the same way with writing. She said you can set a time for, you know, like 10 to 12 on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. But what happens when your children get sick on Thursday, and you have to take them to the doctor from your 10 to 12, or you have a flat tire? And she said that she advised people to get in the habit of writing 15 minutes a day, setting a timer for 15 minutes a day. Sometimes that's all you're going to do. Sometimes you're going to go much further. She said, you can do a lot in 15 minutes. You can write a page, you can revise a paragraph, you can look up, you can research. And she went on to say that when she was in the MFA program, she was also working a part-time job and taking care of 2 small children and a husband. So she had to learn how to, you know, nobody has time. You have to learn how to make time. And time is essential to writing. Time is essential to writing. It just is. You have to have time to write. And most of us don't have time, so you have to make time. And that's one of the best ways I know to make time, and to just do it 15 minutes a day. Much of what you write, you know, won't come to anything, but it's practice, it's doing your scales. And that's what makes you, you know, like a decent writer. There's books out here. You just, on your Facebook page and also on Twitter, you did the link to your 30 prompts, which I'm going to try. I'll probably end up doing, you know, like 3 in one day, and then not. That's kind of the way I work. But, you know, there's prompts are all around us. You know, groups are all around us. You know, like if you need kind of support to do it, if you need deadlines. But, you know, like to me, writing well isn't the question. Writing is, you know, and if you're writing all the time, you will write well. You will write well. You will get good at it. You will. You can't not. So
That's the Sarah Freligh guarantee right there, ladies and gentlemen. Write it down, demand it.
No, don't. No.
I think there's only one other question that I've seen. I apologize to anyone that I've missed, but the question is about if you work with a literary agent to get published. And so maybe you could speak to that, but also to the larger question of how this book came about.
No, I wish I had a literary agent. In fact, I spent the better part of from July until December trying to chase one down, because I finished a novel during the lockdown, one that I'd started years ago, and I finally finished it. I like it, but I couldn't, you know, like several people were interested. One, I'm doing a rewrite for her that I hope to get back to her this summer. But for poetry and short stuff, you don't need an agent. You won't make any money. They don't care about you. So no. This book, interestingly, I had submitted to, they used to do, Harbor Publishing used to do a mini chapbook contest of 10 poems. And I entered that, I think 2 or 3 years ago, maybe. And I think I was a semi-finalist, maybe. And the person wrote back to me and said, I really love this. You know, this is great. And in July, Allison Blevins, who is one of the readers for the contest, wrote to me. She said, here's what we're doing. We're starting this, we're starting to publish chapbooks and eventually full lengths. And she said, do you have a chapbook? And I said, yeah, you know, like I have enough for a chapbook that I've been kind of, you know, kicking around. So she said, please send it to us. So I sent it at the end of July, and September I heard that they were going to publish it, and I was going to be the first one, and it came out in January, and the whole experience has been wonderful. It's been great. Like I do readings in my pajamas, what's not to like with my cats here? Stewie's right over there, Oscar's there, what's not to like? So it's been great. I'm not in any hurry to come out of my house. It sounds terrible, but I'm not. I've gotten a lot of writing done. It's been all right. I don't want to live like this for the rest of my life, but I could get used to this. So that's how that happened. So yeah, and I thank everybody for buying it and saying nice things about it. It's lovely. So yeah.
Very good. Dan, did you have anything? Should we wrap up or take more questions? What do you think?
I think that's our time, unfortunately, but I want to thank Sarah Freligh. That was wonderful. Thank you to Carrie L. Buy the book at Ampersand Books. The link is in the chat. And I'll also say this is our first event of National Poetry Month. I believe all our readings this month are poetry. And you can also catch up with previous readings, and eventually this reading will be online on our website. You can watch it again if you like. So yeah, thank you all for coming, and I'm gonna say have a good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.